Hello, and thanks for joining us today for the preview of the top 12 manufacturing ERP systems report for 2018. We're going to do a brief overview of the criteria of today's report. Then we're going to dig into each of the vendors on the report and give some high-level information about functionality and overall vendor information. Some of the criteria that we're looking at for this report and what we analyze within it are the strengths of the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 vendors, also the niche applications that are best suited for the manufacturing industry. We also take into account the user experience and cultural fit as we're putting this report together. Many different criteria go into this, and at Panorama Consulting, we've been privy to a lot of information regarding RFI responses and RFP responses that are, in the hundreds now from different vendors. So we're exposed to a vast amount of information, and we've got a stockpile of years and years of information for historical purposes as well. And let's jump into the vendors. We'll give you a preview of this report. We're going to start with the Tier 1 vendors, the larger organization software providers. First, we have SAP on the list, and you can see they're almost a $30 billion company. They're approaching that in size. And what that means is large revenue spend on research and development, and also making sure that they're a viable company. Obviously, SAP is not going to be acquired by anybody else, and they're going to be around for a long, long time. We put some data in here around our typical client sizes that we see are implementing these systems. And for SAP, an average sample size client is almost 150 million in annual revenue. The next Tier 1 application is N4. And N4's got a handful of products. You can see here they're approaching a $3 billion company. Recent private equity and influx of funding from the Coke company has really launched them once again. We find that on average, the Panorama clients that are implementing the N4 products are about $50 million in revenue. I mentioned two other vendors here for the Tier 1 in this space is Oracle, now approaching a $40 billion company, so obviously very large, very viable, and a lot of spend in the R&D. Out of our typical clients, we're seeing $575 million in annual revenue. And the last of the Tier 1 vendors is Microsoft. Got an annual revenue of about $90 billion. And what we see on a typical Panorama client implementing Microsoft Dynamics is almost at the $100 million mark. Now we're going to jump into the Tier 2 vendors. We're going to start with IFS. Now, IFS is one of the most well-known, unheard of software systems out there. Each time we're introducing IFS to one of our clients through the selection process, usually they have not heard of IFS. When they see IFS and the functionality behind it, they are certainly swung by its deep and rich functionality. And the reason why we put them at Tier 2 vendors is because they're on the cusp. They are certainly growing. IFS is an emerging U.S. market, very strong in Europe, and now a growing ecosystem of users and resources here in North America. They really target enterprise-type customers, so $100 million and up is really the target type client for IFS. So therefore, they are very scalable, but we still got to put them as a upper Tier 2 type system. Next vendor here in the Tier 2 space is Epicor. So approaching $1 billion. They have been acquired by KKR as a large private equity investment, and that's been about 4 or 5 years now. And so we are certainly seeing some ramifications of that. Their typical target market or their target customer is about 50 million in revenue. They can scale lower and then certainly scale higher and manage multiple billion-dollar companies, but usually that's their sweet spot is 50 million and up. One of the rising stars here from Tier 2 is Abus, and Abus is a German company. They've spun off and have a U.S. division here. The U.S. division is approximately 15 million in revenue. Their target customer is anywhere from 10 million on up. The product, again, is fairly scalable So they've worked with startup companies. We've worked with startup companies on Avis that have no revenue, and then scale up into multiple hundreds of millions. Pretty good technology on the back end here. We'll move on to another tier 2 emerging star here is Rootstock Software. So they are less than 10 million organizations, so certainly smaller, but they are on the way up and growing. They just acquired a company called Canandy, which was their main competitor in the manufacturing space. So the two combined, I'm not quite sure what the revenue looks there, but they are starting to grow. Their target market, their typical customers, anywhere from 10 million in that range on up. Again, probably hundreds of millions they can scale to, but they're not focused on the enterprise type applications. Now we're going to jump to the tier 3 and niche vendor solutions providers. First here is a tier 3. We have placed Cispro ERP as really a upper tier 3. We do see them play in tier 2, lower tier 2 type scenarios, but really a strong tier 3 type solution. They are a South African company with a U.S. division. The U.S. division is about 60 million in annual revenues. They're organically growing, so anywhere from 5 to 10% per year, and they don't want to acquire other ERP systems and bring them in onto their platform. Typical target customer for Cispro is around 25 million. Again, they can scale upwards. And they can also scale down, and you can get into the system for a fair price point. Next tier 3 solution really is IQMS, and a combination of tier 3 type niche solutions. So IQMS is very strong in discrete manufacturing. We see them play very well in the automotive space. For automotive OEM manufacturers, companies supplying the large GMs of the world. Pretty niche, fairly niche product for discrete manufacturing within the auto industry here. From an annual revenue standpoint, about 50 million in revenue. So they are, they're not so small, but they are growing in a mid-sized company. Their target customers, again, here they scale. You can get in the door for fairly cheap, on the lower end for IQMS and good functionality for that price point. But their targets really are 10 million, and above here. They can scale up to, $1 billion as well. The next solution here is Plex, and again, we position Plex as a tier 3 niche solution. It is scalable. There are multiple companies that are billions of dollars that are running Plex, and then there's also multiple companies that are below $10 million that are running Plex. So scalable system for for the functionality and the price point that you get here as well. Plex is very strong in the automotive, again, much like IQMS, very strong in the automotive industry. They're gaining market share in other industries, outside of automotive, outside of discrete manufacturing, even process manufacturing, that they're, it's not a focal point for them, but they are gaining some market share there. Another niche solution that we're seeing making good strides is Just Food ERP. So Just Food is certainly very specific niche manufacturing for food processors, even a couple of special niche kind of industries within food processing, as bakeries and cookie manufacturers, and some straight beverage companies as well. They're a smaller group. They're less than 10 million in size, but they're again, very rich in functionality for their price point. The target customer, starts around 5 million and can go up. They certainly have hundreds of million, revenue for their clients. But it's a good system, to come off of a lower tier type application and migrate to this. So we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us for this preview. Any business questions can be directed to Laura Florence. She's our Director of Business Development. And again, thank you for joining us today, and looking forward to the next webinar.